Hey everybody, Mr. Malfin back with you again. This is an APUSH video focusing in on topic 6.13. This is the second in this series, focusing in on politics in the late Gilded Age. Last time we were talking about the base of support for each of the major political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, and we were starting to lay the groundwork for the 1880 election, focusing in on the factionalization within the Republican Party between the Blaine-led half-breeds and the Conkling-led stalwarts, leading to a compromise ticket in 1880 with Garfield, the half-breed, at the top of the ticket, and Chester A. Arthur, the stalwart, at the bottom of the ticket as his running mate. Now, going up against the Democrats, the Democrat side will be Winfield Hancock. And as you can see here are the results from the 1880 election. Once again, you can see, the old Civil War lines for the most part playing a factor. Don't forget, the Republicans throughout this time period are still going to be engaging in the campaign tactic known as waving the bloody shirt, meaning that, they're going to remind folks that the Republican Party was the party of Lincoln, it was the party of the Union, it was the party of emancipation, it was the true loyal, side in the Civil War, whereas the Democrats were the party of the South, the party of the Confederacy, the party of slavery, the party of rebellious disloyalty. And so they're going to be using that to their advantage quite a bit. Because remember, you still got for the rest of this time period, there are millions of American veterans that are still going to be voting in this election. So you can see here that the popular vote total was pretty darn close there. Pretty razor thin, actually. But, major wins in Pennsylvania and New York is going to allow the Republicans to win in 1880. This, of course, then leads to the infamous assassination of Garfield, which we talked about in class. Don't forget, this is basically based on Charles Guiteau shooting Garfield out of a sense that he was entitled to a government job. And so what does this tell us? It tells us, how corrupt the patronage system had been, to the point where, jobs are just so handed out willy-nilly to party loyalists that, and no consideration for merit, that you actually get a president killed over this. So, keep in mind that the death of Garfield in 1881 is going to have a major impact on the next president, which was Chester A. Arthur. Now, when you see Arthur become president of the United States, there was this general sense that, hey, Chester A. Arthur, if he was known for anything up to this point, he was known as being probably the biggest crony, stooge, patronage guy in the Republican Party. I mean, he was Roscoe Conkling's right-hand man. Conkling was about as shady a political boss as you could get at the federal level. And, Arthur was basically Conkling's boy. So, the thought that, hey, maybe you can have some civil service reform, the thought was that's just going to get, destroyed. However, once in a position of power, Chester A. Arthur as president is actually going to come out in support of reducing patronage, and actually come out in support of civil service reform. Stunning, yes, but also I think there might be some, very simple explanation for it. Arthur realized that the last guy was killed because of this. And Arthur, I don't think, wants to be, the next president to be killed over this. So, anyhow, Chester Arthur is going to be getting credit for the passage of the Pendleton Act. And what this does is create for the first time, a basic civil service system for the awarding of federal jobs. Note, when we say civil service, we're talking about the use of testing, objective testing, merit, experience, things like that, not based on who you voted for, not based on who you donated money to, not based on who your friends are or who you're related to, but actually based on merit. Now, note, it's going to be revolutionary in the long term, and those that were obviously very, very, very in support of patronage are going to find this horrific, but it really is going to be a slow-moving change in terms of, kind of cleaning up the process of awarding federal jobs. What the Pendleton Act does at its time is only change the awarding of federal jobs to a civil service merit-based system for only about 10% of those jobs. So still, the overwhelming majority of federal jobs were still awarded in a political way. But over time, that does begin to change to where it is today, where it's kind of reversed. Today, 90% of federal jobs are awarded through civil service hiring processes, whereas only 10%, now it happens to be the top 10% of federal jobs are still awarded on a political basis. So, like, for example, if you want to get a job as a postal worker, that's awarded through civil service. But if you want to become the postmaster general, that is a politically appointed job. If you want to work as an FBI agent, that's civil service. But if you want to be the head of the Justice Department, that's, the Attorney General, that's a politically appointed position. So be mindful of that. But still, though, the Pendleton Act is going to be a very, very, very important mark of changing how we award federal jobs. And it's pretty much the only feather in Chester A. Arthur's cap as president. Now, during this age of, Gilded Age politics, one of the themes continually is concerns about government corruption. Because it's not just patronage that was an issue. It was just overall criminality in the federal government in terms of people that are in their jobs, however they got those jobs, robbing the taxpayer, skimming off the top, neglecting their duties, all that kind of stuff. And, there was a sense that through this corruption, intrinsically, there is a sense of government waste. That, in other words, if you've got people that are basically there to rip the government off, you really don't need them there, period. You probably don't even need that position, period. So these folks that wanted to have a much more slimmed down, honest, pragmatic government are going to be known as mugwumps. Now, these are going to be on the Republican side. And so, their idea was clean up government, though at the same time keep government small, which meant that, yes, you want to make sure those that are working in the federal government are honest, but the idea of using the power of the government to assist working class people living in poverty, or to try to regulate monopolies, that was not really what these folks were looking for. And so these Republicans are not going to be renominating Chester A. Arthur, even though, yes, he does sign into law the Pendleton Act. His reputation still, being associated with Roscoe Conkling and just, years and years and years and years of being associated with kind of the dirty business of patronage is going to turn mugwumps off, and so Arthur won't get renominated. Not that Arthur, I think, was that concerned about it. Nobody ever accused Chester A. Arthur of working too hard. So, anyhow, what that then, leads to is, a new candidate for the Republicans. Now, as you can see here in this slide, you can already get a sense of, where people are going to be going. The mugwump faction of trying to clean up government is going to be looking for a candidate, regardless of party, ultimately, of who's going to be seen as the most honest with regards to government and keeping it slim and trim. And the reality is that the Republican nominee in 1884, James Blaine, remember, the leader of the half-breed faction, as I mentioned before, the half-breeds were people that talked a good game on civil service reform and ending patronage, but in reality, they didn't really, live up to their ideals. So the Republican Party, period, is going to have a reputation for having, at the federal level anyway, a history of, unscrupulous utilization of patronage, which then gives the Democrat candidate, New York's Grover Cleveland, an inroad to try to be able to become the first elected Democrat since James Buchanan, all the way back in 1856. Cleveland's an interesting figure. Pretty young guy for running for president. He's in his 40s at the time. And he doesn't fit the mold of who you might think would be running at this point in time. This is a guy that, for example, did not serve in the Civil War. He did not. He was not a Civil War veteran in a period where all these other folks running for president historically were veterans of the Civil War. Cleveland was also very, very, very well respected for honesty. That Cleveland was known as Grover the Good in New York because he was viewed as an honest candidate, an honest guy, a guy that did not, bow down to patronage and those kinds of things. So if you're somebody that's looking for someone that, not only talks the talk but seemingly walks the walk, Cleveland does seem to be perhaps your guy in 1884. However, there is a scandal that's going to be following Cleveland in 1884, and a pretty remarkable scandal for the Victorian era that we're talking about. It just so happens that Grover Cleveland, who was a bachelor, had never been married up to this point, though did have a child. He did have a child out of wedlock. And once again, to have a child out of wedlock back then was extremely scandalous, and would have thought to have been something that probably would have precluded you from becoming a president of the United States. But once again, in a sense of living up to his moniker of being an honest candidate, Cleveland does not lie about having this child once it's reported in the newspapers. He admits, he says, yes, I have this child. I have been financially taking care of her and her mother her entire life. It is what it is. You know what I mean? And seemingly, it is pretty remarkable. Something that you would have thought would have certainly destroyed his campaign doesn't seem to stick. So it's pretty wild, despite this, political cartoon obviously put out by the Republicans, trying to, paint Cleveland in a bad light. But as you can see here, the ultimate, the last laugh is ultimately going to be with Grover Cleveland. Ma, where's my pa? Well, he's going to the White House. Ha, ha, ha. We're going to be seeing, Blaine unable to win over Mugwump support, and we're going to see Grover Cleveland win. But unfortunately, there's also going to be something that is going to hinder the Republicans' ability to win in 1884. It's not just the association with patronage and whatnot. It's also going to be, the association with the Republicans being the party of nativism, the party of WASP superiority. We're going to be seeing a well-known association by Republicans of associating the Democrats with rum, Romanism, and rebellion. The idea being is that the Democratic Party, in addition to being the party of the Confederates, it is the party of the immigrants supposedly invading America, bringing their Catholicism and their vice with them. Blaine, is not going to be able to, quickly repudiate this, this statement led by Dr. Samuel Burchard, kind of framing the Democrats in this way. And this is going to hurt in New York City, and which therefore hurts in New York State, which Cleveland already was going to have an advantage in because that's where he hailed from. He hailed from Buffalo, New York, Western New York. And so for all of these reasons, you're going to see the Republicans at a time where they probably should have won every single presidential election are going to stumble in 1884. And as you can see here, northeastern states like New Jersey, New York, and Connecticut, which would normally have probably gone Republican, end up going Democrat in 1884. And so you can see Cleveland's going to be able to come out on top. So Cleveland is going to be defying the odds, becoming the first Democrat president elected since 1856. And when we come back, we will take a look at Cleveland's first term in office. All right, we'll see you next time.